We're going to announce the winner at the wedge. And I don't think anyone here needs an introduction. My co-host, Ted Barrow, my boss, Jerry Hsu, my teammate, Akwasí, my favorite crusty spot skater, Lurker Lou, and we've got Sam Korman, who's my favorite blogger. One last thing I wanted to share. Jerry Hsu photo shirt. He told me I had to wear it this morning.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mo. Thank you, everyone who's been involved in volunteering, lending your time, and helping set this up, as well as all of you who are here. It's amazing. It's exhilarating. It's been years since I've seen this many people in a room and been able to subject people to a slide lecture. First things first, it's important to acknowledge that we're on native land. Wherever we come from is native land. We'll continue to be native land wherever we go in the Americas. We are guests, not hosts. Let's approach this place with gratitude and respect, recognizing that Tempe is the homeland of the native people who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. Anthropological studies document large and advanced ancestral Otham settlements located throughout all of present-day Tempe and recognize the ancestral lands of the Otham, known as the Pima, Pipash, known as the Maricopa, and their ancestors is extending far beyond our community. This land continues to be spiritually connected to the Otham of the Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian community, and the Gila River Indian community, a member of which is the cameraman right now, Ruben. Thank you. This is a little bit awkward. This is a land acknowledgement, but also a statement of culpability. I've been doing a little research in the area, trying to learn about and recover a story that has to do with my own family. How many people have heard of the song "The Ballad of Ira Hayes," famously covered by Johnny Cash? Yeah. Well, as you may know, the Pima had a thriving agricultural economy for centuries in the Gila River Valley, thanks to their ability to irrigate and farm through 2 drought seasons well into the 19th century. They acted as stewards and Samaritans, helping people through the desert and sharing water through the 1850s during the gold rush, until the Federal Homestead Act of 1862 and the Desert Land Act of 1877 brought a large influx of non-native settlers to central Arizona. This led to their own water that they had irrigated for centuries being diverted away from their reservation. And by the early 20th century, their economy had collapsed and a once thriving tribe was reduced to starvation and poverty. The federal government responded by reinforcing the uneven distribution of water in the state, giving non-native settlements greater access to water, depriving reservation-bound tribes basic human rights. Now, when I first heard, I was listening to The Ballad of Ira Hayes on a car trip with my mother while driving through Arizona about 25 years ago, and my mom said something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, my grandfather Shirley Ward had something to do with that," and I was like, "Well, what's it like? What was his role?" And she's like, "I don't know," which leads me to believe that he was probably to a great extent involved directly with the disenfranchisement of the Otham River people in Arizona, which means that many of the privileges that I've enjoyed, including the college education that played one crucial step of getting me up on this podium, is due to that. I'm saying this not to take any more air out of the room, but simply to acknowledge that I didn't really have to look too far within this land and its people's history to find evidence of my own family's probable malfeasance. We live with this history, we're skating on native land, and we have always been. Okay, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. You guys ready to get weird? This is a panel about art and skateboarding. I'm Ted Barrow. I'm an art historian, writer, and aging skateboarder. For as long as I can remember, I've been confused about the relationship. Oh yeah, some old school shit, here we go. Brownie points if you recognize this and can kind of understand why this is here. I've been confused about the relationship between art and skateboarding. My father was an artist, and he and his friends held the ideas in their art to be self-evident, needing no explanation, and somehow existing in this ethereal world above the muck of daily life. As I started to discover my own world through skateboarding, the ideas and experiences that came with that seemed a world away from the elevated world of art making and looking. But then it's like, my first board was a Neil Blender. My favorite skaters were Lance Mountain, Nadas Kappas, and Mark Gonzalez. And these guys were definitely artists and skateboarders. So was skateboarding art? Was it just the disposable graphic on the board or something more pervasive? I didn't use the word pervasive in 5th grade, but you get the idea. Growing up in the 90s, in the era of Ed Templeton and Sean Cliver, art was both queered and mocked, and rarefied and exalted. I definitely knew that there were skaters that were artists, but they used self-deprecating and now pretty homophobic language to describe what they did. On the other side, I had people like Jeff Rowley, I don't know if y'all can see this, telling me that art is bollocks, or Dill calling it art. And you know, because they're pro, they must be experts about everything else, right? Like I said, confusing. Well, I'm not going to promise to clarify any of these issues, but simply to illuminate some of the weird points of confusion and hopefully touch on some bigger ideas with all of you. This is not the first time I've attempted something like this. Yeah, sorry, you're going to get a slide lecture, and then we're going to talk to the people. Long before the pandemic lockdown of 2020, I knew that my skateboarding and art exhibition idea I was planning as the assistant curator to a small museum just outside of New York City was doomed. In one of the mini meetings with the director of the museum, I explained my thesis for the show, which I tentatively titled Patina, which is as follows. Not only does skateboarding reach a broad and diverse swathe of different intergenerational cultures and communities, and not only was there then, on this eve of the Olympics, a great opportunity to have private corporations with a vested interest in skateboarding to, I don't know, just fund it, but also, patina had a twofold appeal. First, referring to the antiquarian's eye for texture associated with fine art objects, and also that we skaters are interested in patina, which we recognize as the authentic slide and scuff marks on our skateboard shoes and encouraging looking ledges. Patina is a language of passionate experts, recognized by fellow enthusiasts worldwide, I claimed. And patina sort of sounds like patinar, the Spanish word for skate, right? You guys see it? Maybe some of y'all would see a show like that in a museum in Yonkers, I don't know. I thought I was so clever, or at least well poised to get the show approved, but no. My director said, I can't have someone falling into a skateboard pit, breaking their arm and holding us liable. It was the pit that got me. Rule of thumb for curators to be, if your supervisor thinks that you're trying to put a dangerous pit and not an inclusive skate bowl in a museum exhibition, your idea is doomed, and so are you. This is by no means the only time that someone from the art world has used inadequate language to describe what we do. The language of art speak and how we talk about skateboarding are often at loggerheads. Shit. The language of art speak and how we talk about art are also at loggerheads. I don't even know what loggerhead is. There recently was that video with art guy Jeffrey Deitch on Jankum where he quotes Aaron Rose in describing skateboarding as the physical equivalent of graffiti or unsanctioned urban performance art, which is confusing. And then there's Jerry Saltz, famous art critic, calling the Simp Arc Bowl in Deitch's gallery from 2003 an actual skateboard tube. What is an actual skateboard tube? For some context, these are the two major authorities, a dealer and a critic in the New York art world, and they can't even find the right words when talking about skateboarding. And then there's how we tend to talk about art within skateboarding as personal expression, or a reaction to our environment, or inherent in the act itself. I've heard the threadbare urban canvas phrase so many times that I sneeze from the metaphoric dust of this moldering analogy. It's not that I don't believe it, it's just that I don't always see it that way. For as many different skateboarders as there are just as many different ideas, oh, don't look at that yet, and interpretations about what skateboarding means. It can be art, and it can be sport. It can be a lifestyle or an escape from your lifestyle. It can be a form of meditation or a way to engage with others. An expression of one's politics or meaningless play. I'm using this Nixon ad that I recently encountered in Thrasher magazine to illustrate the fact that sometimes skateboarding can be neoliberal brand building in a late capitalist scorched earth. Or anarcho-punk training for the post-apocalyptic mushroom foraging communes that will surely exist after society fails. Aesthetic or apathetic, all these things and more. The one thing it can't be is securely fixed to one person's idea of it, as this mad professor in Ban This assured us in 1989, for anyone else. Which is why I'm leaving patina back in the pit of doomed ideas and inviting you all to explore the concepts of empathy and texture and how they might apply to the art and ideas of the skateboarders who have kindly agreed to watch me hector them on this table for 5 minutes. To me, skateboarding itself requires a type of empathy, one that is often based on texture. We connect with the surface of street furniture and, in Lou's and Jerry's case, rocks, in a way that is unique. And similarly, artworks draw us in through empathy. We sense texture in a different way, alive to the perceptual experiences that art and only art offers. So while these considerations that we make as skateboarders are almost too obvious, they play no small role in the types of concerns that I see in each of the artists' work on this panel. Questions I'll want to explore with everyone here are successes and obstacles that each of you have had in your separate disciplines. Tony Cox once told me that the only people who are more insecure than professional skateboarders are artists. I think besides the commonality that both activities share an idea of self-expression, which is, of course connects to insecurity and vulnerability, but also speaks to precarity. As many of you may know, most professional skateboarders don't have health insurance or job security and are fed scraps from companies whose attitude seems to be that if you don't like it, someone else will. Professional skateboarders are literal fungible tokens whose financial success depends on the whims of marketability. Sorry, guys. A similar relationship exists between artists and their galleries. Most working artists make a middle-class wage if they're lucky, and many work jobs on the side to support their art-making practice. Blue-chip galleries suck up all the talent, putting mid-tier galleries and their artists in a similar situation as core brands who are farmed by your Nikes and Adidases, and I want some New Balances, so I'm not going to say that, Chad Tim Tim. Both exist in a continual state of precarity, having to make great sacrifices for the privilege of doing something that is rarefied, difficult, and in many cases, meaningless to most people. And now the panelists. Jerry Hsu is, according to Patrick O'Dell, probably smarter than John Rattray. I think he used to be... is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. I think he used to skate, right? He used to be a professional skater, but now he runs everyone's favorite Enigma, Sci-Fi Fantasy. He skated for NC Clothing and Osiris. Fun fact. Bet y'all don't know this. Brandon Turner, Stu Graham, and Jerry Hsu are the same age. Another fun fact. He's modeled sunglasses with Austin Gillette and Josh Harmony. In a video directed by Aaron Rose for Homme l'Officiel. He's a playable video game character in Skate 1, 2, and 3. More importantly, when you hear Sonic Youth's cover of Superstar, you think of Jerry Hsu thanks to his bag of suck part. As a photographer, he has contributed to Vice magazine and published numerous zines, including the titles Table for One and Killing Season, I think both 2013. More recently, The Beautiful Flower is the World, and today we'll be looking at a selection of photos from his upcoming book, Lonely City. That's Jerry with the middle finger and the real shirt in the lower right on my screen. My art statement about Jerry's work. Jerry's devious perspective reveals the abject and the sympathetic in equal measure with melancholy humor, a longing that presupposes that what we see here now in this photo is both cringe and precious like all of us. According to Wikipedia, as of October 2018, Hsu does not have pro status in skateboarding anymore and has no sponsors. In addition to ruining skateboarding on Slaps 1 in a Million, Louis Sarowsky has appeared...
It's like a teacher on the first day.
Sarowsky, thank you, my bad. Lurker Lou has appeared and filmed numerous parts, including, but not limited to, the masterpiece Lurkers 2, where his part was slightly overshadowed by a very handsome or delusional skateboarder named Ted Barrow. And most recently, the Lurking with Lou series on Village Psychic. Lou carves rocks in both the skate and art-making senses of the word. Happy face smiley emoji. I wanted Lou for his approach to both finding spots, making spots, his granular understanding of the geologic history of skate spots, what we art nerds call medium specificity, which makes an intuitive sense about which Lou will have, I'm sure, a lot more to say. Akwasí Owusu's reused wooden sculptures and musical instruments presuppose haptic contact, touching, and also redress and renew African sculpture traditions within a specifically American idiom. He also casts and animates works with a 3D printer, then casts them in permanent materials like metal. He's young, he's fucking sick. He did a full cab fakie manual. And you can tell that there's an irreverent playfulness and thoughtful sense of experimentation in his choices of materials and subjects that, to me, correspond to the amazing things he does on a skateboard. He was LD's Pick of the Week in 2020 on the 9 Club. And I'm honored to have him on this panel. Finally, Sam Korman's Waxing the Curb has, much to my chagrin, successfully done what I've been unable to do, to take skateboarding as a serious field of criticism while at the same time not losing the humor or the weirdness of it. Before being a skate writer, skate blogger, Korman was an art critic, contributing to such esteemed publications as Artforum and others, about which he has this to say, and this is a quote from his excellent blog, Waxing the Curb. Starting something new, writing about something so central to my identity, but which I had not yet put to words, was both thrilling and painful. I felt exposed, as in youth, a poser once more. But I also felt unified for the first time in ages, perhaps testifying to the fit of my new path, or perhaps the onerous nature of art criticism. People stopped crossing the street when they saw me, true story. And I was able, as a straight white guy in my mid-30s, to escape the tendency to withdraw, see SNL skit Man Park, coming out of the pandemic with more friends, not less. One of my favorite passages of his review of Andrew Allen's part, or Andrew Allen as a skater, maybe more broadly. More to the point, Allen is championed by the mainstream and has a cultish following amongst the style snobs of this world, me included, a balancing act made all the more unusual by his deliberate de-skilling over the years, as if the more refined his skating gets, the clumsier he looks on a skateboard. As you can see, Sam's work is infused with a sensibility that is both patient, attentive, engaged, but also slightly removed and ironic, empathetic, but sometimes bristling with irony. Sam has prepared a slideshow for us wherein he will attempt to relate what he likes about certain artists to skateboarding itself. So, enough of me blabbing. The first question I'm going to ask all of you, obviously, is what was your first video and who is your favorite artist? I'm going to go like this. Jerry.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay. Thanks for coming, everybody. Let's see. The question was,
What was your first video?
okay, so the first video I ever saw was 411 number 3, which might be surprising to some of you. But when I started skateboarding, I had no access to any type of media or anything, because it was just like you just had to go to the skate shop and buy it, and I didn't have the money to do it. So that was the first video I ever saw.
Were you like Rodney Mulligan in your garage barn thing?
I mean, at that point, like I had only seen magazine. I had one issue of Thrasher magazine, and it was very hard to kind of like figure out what was going on just from still photographs and like 9-frame sequences. So it was really kind of like I didn't really know anything or have any idea what tricks were yet. But when I saw that video, it was it was pretty mind-blowing, obviously. The first skate video you ever see is kind of crazy.
Is that the one, the Chaos Sections, Tide is High, Blondie, that one?
I think so. I mean, like, there's a Scott Johnston profile in it. There's an Eric Costin profile.
Oh,
Rick
shit,
Howard's
yeah.
on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's unusual because it's such a, like, long video filled with so much stuff and so many people. I think, like, generally, like, videos at that time, it's like, 6 to 8 people, parts. That's it. So
Who was your
pretty
favorite part?
overwhelming.
Who's your favorite part in
that? Actually, I think my favorite part are all the Wheels of Fortunes in it, because they're all very strange. Like Javier Nunez has a Wheels of Fortune in it, and like, and it's like just a very weird. Like there's no curation. It's just kind of like these are all the people that we could get stuff this month or whatever. But I don't know, my favorite part, I think like my favorite, this might sound kind of weird, but like this skater named Mike Judge is, or not Mike Judge,
Judd.
No, Mike Judd, sorry.
TSA.
Right,
Yeah.
Team Santa Ana. anyways, he has a Wheels of Fortune, and it's not the skating, but it's kind of his attitude that I really liked. I thought that like because he really kind of embodied what I had sort of observed at the time that skaters were like. They're very like bullyish and kind of like they were so like hardened and kind of like how kind of like people who are pushed to the edges start to act. And I just thought that was kind of cool because I had none of that in me yet.
Well, you weren't from Santa Ana like he was.
No, I was. Yeah. So he was a real dick in it. And
Yeah.
He was like being really mean to this other skater. And I don't know. For better or worse, I kind of just thought that was like cool.
Yeah.
So
All right. Maybe we'll just do skate videos first, then we'll go back to art. Yeah? Akwasí.
Hi. My first skate video that I remember watching is probably Girl, Yeah, Right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Young man.
But yeah, I just remember like the part where they had the green screen ramp and the dude ollied over the street.
Do you mind me asking how old you were at the time?
I was probably like 13 or 14.
Was there any part of you that believed that actually happened?
Yeah.
No
when
way.
When I first saw it, yeah,
Oh,
I was
man.
like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I had to go back a few times, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then I realized like, oh no, they did something there.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah. Like once you actually kind of like start skating, you're like, wait,
Yeah.
no, that didn't work.
Yeah, it definitely got me though.
Wow. All right. Favorite part in that one besides the green screen?
Probably Costin.
Nice. All right. Hey, I see this. Like, both you started the team. He skates for it. Costume parts in your first seminal videos. Okay. Lou, which is your favorite Eric Costume part?
Mouse.
Oh, yeah,
Mouse.
yeah, cool.
Gotta get low. How do I get close to the mic? Okay, cool. Mouse, yeah.
Yeah.
Cost the mouse, yes.
All right. What about like just generally?
Favorite or first?
First favorite, like yeah.
First is Trilogy. I didn't know what was going on though. All I knew was a Benihana with crazy blonde hair flying off a launch ramp in a hallway.
Do you notice
I didn't
that-
understand skating. It was like this is the first video that I saw, but my brain hadn't adapted to heel flip, kick flip, or anything. But LeVar McBride, I remembered so vividly in that. And then a year went by, and I didn't see a video. I just skated. Kid I grew up with, started skating with, he came home from a skate shop with 4-1-18 and Planet Earth Silver. We watched Planet Earth Silver first, and at this time I was starting to understand tricks, backside, tail slide, what switch stance was.
Yeah.
And Caesar Singh, or whoever can pronounce the name is what it is. Caesar Singh's part came on, and I had started to realize what switch stance was. And I understood that Caesar Singh was better switched than I thought I would ever be on a skateboard. I went home that night and I ollied up a curb, and I was like, I have to start skating switch at this moment right now. Because of him and Planet Earth Silver. The music, favorite part in the video though, Joey Bass.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, with the opening. So Planet Earth Silver, Joey Bass, Caesar Singh like blew my head off and put me in a depressive state for like probably a few months until I understood how to switch flip, because I never learned how to switch ollie, and I still can't really switch ollie.
What were you like going through puberty at the time?
Yeah, it
okay.
was
So it's not all Caesar Singh.
October. It was October 1996, and
Yeah.
I was about to turn 13.
Okay, yeah.
So yes.
That's a emo one. Sam. It's still. That bee is gonna have a liquid death.
Don't kill it.
No, I don't want to kill it.
I was just trying to scoop it.
I thought I could scoop it away, but I didn't want you to drink
He
it.
wants
Thank you.
He
Yeah.
wants to go in there. It's a bee box. It's warm.
He can have it. It can have it.
If it makes its way back into the can, I'll put a...
Thank you. I mean, let's just give it to the bee. I'm gonna pee my pants anyway. So.
It's hard to follow the bee, but I think my first skate video was In Bloom,
Oh.
which is a weird one, I guess. But and maybe favorite part was Tony T, and
Yeah.
I loved the Molly Crew song. Like I was really into punk at the time, and suddenly I was like, maybe I like hair metal. Like
Yeah.
maybe this is a transitional thing for me.
Seeing
Not-
Tony T's like Janice-faced makeout thing where he's acting out what it'd be like to make out with him. Pretty cool.
Yeah. I definitely tried to pull that off because I wasn't making out with anyone at the time.
Yeah. No, I know, but it was good training. I mean, I guess. Yeah.
And at that time, you were also trying to pull off wearing his TNT high top crazy shoes with the skinny jeans.
Indeed, I was. Which is why my part overshadowed yours in the first year. Just in terms of outfit, but you did flip into tricks, which I didn't do. Okay, now let's start with Sam, and then we're gonna move back through talking about art and maybe the first sort of work that got you into it, not referring to your.
First work that got me into it.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and the museum there is called the Albright Knox Art Gallery, and they have an incredible collection. I remember going there as a kid and being kind of pushed into one of Lucas Samaris's mirrored rooms, which predate the Yayoi Kusama ones. Lucas Samaris was a total freak in the 1960s and created these immersive environments filled with mirrors. You take your shoes off and you go inside, and there's a table that's made out of a mirror. And I think having a exponential mirror stage moment as a child where seeing myself reflected to infinity was I think this is actually very cool. And that was probably my formative art moment.
Age?
6.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it was kind of always the path I wanted to go on.
That's cool.
That actually reminded me of a even earlier formative art moment. I'll say Andy Goldsworthy. I had a book. My mom had a book. My brother was starting to be a stone wall builder. And Storm King, he had just finished Storm King's probably 2000, and realizing the ephemeral nature work that Goldsworthy had created. It stuck in my head differently in art. And Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty, also a book that my mother had. But formative art moment was when I was about 6 years old. I was sitting eating breakfast. I don't remember this. My mom told me this a couple years ago. And there was a nicely wood-carved cardinal bird that we had on a windowsill next to one that was so crudely carved with it was terrible. I looked at it and I said, "That's artistic slop."
Damn.
And my mom said, anything can be art.
Or slop.
And I was just and I wasn't even had any intention of it being art. I'm 6 years old. I barely remember this. She told me, and I was like, wow. And I started vaguely remembering. And both those objects she still has. And so it was kind of a formative moment at 6, and then about 16 when the Goldsworthy book was introduced to myself.
Cool. Quasi.
I would say something that kind of got me into art. It's not even that long ago. Maybe 5 years ago. I was really into.
No, it's gonna be.
It's gonna be a mile.
Yeah, we're recorded,
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. There was this kalimba, a musical instrument that I found on the internet, and it. I can't even remember the artist's name, but I just thought it was cool because he made it out of a face, and it was he used the hair as the notes for the kalimba. And I don't know, for some reason that right there just kind of got me inspired into making art, making my own faces and masks and characters and stuff like that. I would say that was a pretty defining moment.
That's cool. Around what year?
This was probably 2018, 17 maybe.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Jerry Hsu.
Probably, I'd always been interested in making art as a little kid, but obviously had no idea. It was just fun. And my mom actually, strangely, my family has no interest in art or very many. They're engineers, so they're kind of they're not very into that stuff. But they did. My mom did send me to art classes and stuff after school, which was really awesome. But I think when I really started to become interested in it was when I got into comic books. I think comic books really made me extremely interested in wanting to do it and to emulate something that I was seeing other people do. And the first time I had like heroes, I think like certain comic book artists I really liked, and I tried to draw like them. So I think that was kind of like the very first time I was like, oh, like I want to do what these people are doing. And then after, yeah.
So is that like the telling a story with like image and text, or like the sort of like exaggeration, like sort of layout of the image itself?
I would say it was more of a like it was more emulation, and it was more like I wanted to see if I could be as good. I think because I think when you're that young, you're sort of obsessed with being good sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're sort of obsessed with affirmation, and like kind of like you want to be the best at something. You want to be better than other people, your friends, or not necessarily you want to be better, but you're sort of curious about what you're capable of.
Yeah.
But then after that, I feel like I grew up in a suburb in Northern California, so we didn't really have access to too much stuff like museums and stuff, and I didn't really get taken to them. So my exposure to like a lot of the stuff that I got into in the beginning was basically just like Barnes and Noble, which sounds kind of funny, but but their art section was actually pretty subversive. Looking back on it, like you could find like a lot of like bondage stuff and just like kind of crazy shit where I was just like, looking back, like, damn, I can't believe this like weird, like they had like Nan Goldin books even, you know what I mean? So that's where I discovered, like they would have a pop art section, like Robert Rauschenberg, stuff like that. Really, really popular stuff, but my introduction, that's kind of how it happened.
Okay, yeah. Papalardo once said his favorite book was the self-help section at Barnes & Noble. Like that. Yeah, that's true, though, that, in the golden age of big chain bookstores, you could get a lot of weird stuff. God, the train's gone, and now I'm feeling very nervous. I'm thinking about, okay, here's a broad question that's a little more challenging, but there's been a lot of talk about representation, what that means over the weekend, both panels in different ways. Financial success, the correlation between an idea and an image and a practice. And I'm curious how this can be explored in each of your practices. Art objects, images, practices have a different currency in the world of art making versus skateboarding. So how can questions of materials and messages be conveyed? In other words, what are you trying to say? Jerry, I'm going to start with you because I have your images on the screen. I love these two guys. I mean, I kind of hate this kid on the left, but can you talk a little bit about, because these are kind of earlier photos. This is one of the first photos I saw of yours where on the left there I was like, oh, I like this shit.
Well, I'll start with the kid in the gutter because this is this photo I probably took when I was 13. This is a very, very early picture, and this is just my best friend Will at the time, and we skated every day together. It was sort of like, like when you meet your best friend when you're 12. It's kind of like one of the most important people in your life forever. It's sort of like, like how Stephen King always writes about this age of child because it's a very, very formative time.
Right.
Anyways, he's very influential to me, and also I'll just say that like the reason I started taking photographs is just because of the nature of skateboarding and documentation and like documenting yourself. People always ask that shit, and I'm just like, well, I don't know. Like, we look at magazines and videos, and we become obsessed with just doing it ourselves. So this is like with my mom's camera, and this is just us messing around on his street. Like we figured out that we could lift that grate up, and he was like, I'll get in it, and it's just sort of one of those fun moments, So that's that photo. That's just kind of like one of the first photos that I took that I was like, oh, like I want to keep this one.
Yeah.
Like I don't, like this one seems important. And this is
I was in Russia on. This is in Moscow. I was on some kind of skate trip with 411, I think. This is kind of when like. This is during like kind of like a skateboard boom, and there was like a lot of money, and we could go on these like really random trips with really random people.
Who was on your trip at this one?
This one was so Anthony Clairval and Joe Brook had organized this one, and it was like Kenny Reed, Cairo Foster, Justin Strubing, Jose Rojo, myself, and Tony Cox. So a pretty cool group of people. And this kid was. I mean, forgive the expression, but like basically the son of like Romanian gypsies. I don't know if that's
Roma,
really like,
yeah.
But they were like juggling all. We were walking down the street at night, and they were just all the kids were all juggling around us, and like I didn't understand what was happening. I was just like, oh, this is cool. This is so interesting. And then I saw that their father was walking alongside us, like not alongside us, but nearby.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that they were trying to rob us. They were trying to pickpocket us, like distract us, and also rob us. There's like so many kids, so it was just this like this con that was going on. And I had my camera, and then like I felt this kid's hand, in my pocket, and when I turned around, he just started kind of acting aggressively. And that's when this picture was taken. and he was like spitting and kicking and like what you would kind of expect.
Kid shit.
Yeah, kid stuff. Kid robber stuff.
Kid robber. What's funny though is it does kind of look like the hyper foreshortened like comic book frame of like someone taking off or something like that.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, I mean like generally there's not too much action in like the photos I take, but like this one does have like a very like dramatic form in it.
Yeah. Wow. All right, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because I got I wanted to talk about Akwasí. I mean, we could start by like because I don't have any images of the jewelry you made, but you have it, and like I was checking out that video of how that ear ring. What is it called?
This ring?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
The ring. This one I called it butterfly because it's like a butterfly but made out of ears.
Yeah.
So I
was thinking ear ring, but no.
That's a good one.
No, I don't
like
know.
That one. That's actually really sick. But I don't know. Like that one was just a random thing. Like I was adding ears to a character I made on Blender. So I had a face and I was adding ears to it, and I only had the right ear. So like I duplicated it so that I can flip it and get the left ear. Yeah. And as soon as I did that, I saw them together and it looked like wings. And I was like, oh, that'd be kind of just like the idea sparked in my head. Like, oh, maybe like let me do that later. Like make a butterfly out of ears.
So how did you do? Like I could kind of get the sense on the video you put up that it's like you did a 3D printed it first?
Yeah. So for the process for this ring, I just kind of found a 3D model of an ear, and I found a reference image of a butterfly, and I kind of like pretty much made the ear take the shape of the butterfly, and then I 3D printed it. Once I did that, and then I used a lost wax casting process to cast.
Is crazy. I mean, it's amazing. That's so yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Sorry. Besides it being amazing and crazy.
Yeah, it's just it's cool because I think it's like just a new way of making jewelry, or just a new way of doing stuff using the computer. Like most people, in the past just carve out of a block of wax and then they use that to make the casting. But I just think it's cool to be able to be doing something that's, I guess, like new and wasn't available. Maybe like, at least to the masses. Like a 3D printer nowadays is only like $250. Like the one I use is only $200. So. But
even that process of using new technology to do a very old technique of like lost wax casting. I mean, the art historian in me thinks of like Hellenistic and like Greek bronzes and things like that. And then the kind of weird post-colonial racist history where when Benin bronzes from Africa were like quote unquote discovered or encountered or thought about, they thought that the Africans they encountered could not have been capable of doing something like this. So it must be the lost people of Atlantis or ancient aliens or some shit, you know? So it's like, to me, it's really interesting that there is a much longer like art historical lineage to this technique, but also that like a lot of that 3D printed stuff is as ephemeral as wax in the long term. But like, what's the material? Is it silver?
Yeah, this piece is sterling silver.
Wow. Yeah. How long did the whole process take?
It varies on depending on what I'm making, but this one specifically was pretty fast because I was just using like a model that like, because most of the times like I scan something like a sculpture that I make, and then I 3D scan that and then get it to the computer. So it takes as long as the sculpture takes, and the scanning, which is like a day. It takes a lot of time. But this one, I kind of did it like I thought of the idea and then I had it in silver, like I think a day and a half, 2 later.
Wow.
Yeah.
The punning on materials and medium also makes me think a little bit from Earring or Butterfly.
Yeah.
of Lou, of your work, of like how you're punning on, in some ways, like what you're making and how you're making in your castings and your carving. Right. I just want to like, because I did a little thing. Where's my little thing?
Little thing. Pull it
Yeah,
out.
we're not going to get to all these things, I can tell, but I'm going the wrong way. That was a good slide, though. Remember the zombie apocalypse? There we go.
That's a carving.
That's a carving.
Yeah, it's a carving, not a casting.
I know.
Yeah.
You're trying to sun me. I'm just kidding. Your part was way better than mine in Lurkers too. No, but in terms of casting and in terms of like connecting ideas that most skateboarders kind of keep intuitively to a material that most non-skateboarders experience very differently. Like, can you talk a little bit about like how you started carving in stone and what the process was leading up to that?
Yeah, I can dabble in on that. Well, it kind of started with the mold making and the casting. When I was like kind of delving into sculpture, I immediately knew that mold making and like casting is essentially the silk screening to sculpture as like to painting, silk screening and painting and mold making. And it was like an introductory route to learn how to stone carve. Most traditional stone carvers build a model in clay, and they work off a clay model they built that they sculpted out of clay. I knew I wanted to work in stone. I was like yearning for it for years, like probably about 4 years before I actually dabbled in it.
Did this have to do with the meltdown at LES and like skate park skating where you say skate real spots? Was it?
Yeah, that was 2016, December 16th, 2016, when I had my skate park meltdown.
Trump was elected. It was a bad year.
Yeah, that was weird. That coincided with getting a car and going to skate parks and having like, why do I have a car and I go to skate parks? Yeah. So the castings took over for a few years. I'd say late 2016, 17, 18, throughout 19, and then in early 2020, I went to Athens. And I saw Acropolis and the Parthenon and whatever else is throughout Athens. I'm not sure if anyone's been there. The bombardment that happened in Athens for, 3,500 years, and realized all this stuff's still there. And I like hit the weed pen at the Parthenon. The wind was howling. This sunbeam came through, and I just like had this epiphany. It was like life like flashed in front of my eyes. I was like, I have no children. Just a skateboarder and an artist, and could die on this plane ride home. I could die from a crazy Exarchian experience by staying in the anarchy zone in Athens, and just came off the mountain, looked at my two buddies and said, I'm gonna go back to America. I'm only working in metal and stone. Wow. Because the archival value is something I always strive for with casting and concrete and resin. I was like, I've just, for the last couple of years, I've been like really not wanting to cast in resin and concrete because concrete's a 16% carbon footprint on the earth, and resin, we don't need to talk about how toxic, and I don't even need to be using that material really. So,
but it's repurposed stone.
Yeah.
And
now, yes, I try to work in only reclaimed granite and reclaimed everything because it exists in wood and whiskey bars.
Yeah.
It also exists in the stone world.
What's the relationship between the idea, the object, and the material?
The idea is that I am a skateboarder, and I fought as an artist, trying to, like, throughout my mid-20s, being like, I don't want my art to be like skate art. I don't want to do skate art. And then, like, right before I turned 30, I just, like, swallowed the pill and accepted that I'm gonna make art, and whether I like it or not, it's gonna be related to skateboarding.
Yeah. Can we hold that for a minute, just because I actually now want to ask a question that I don't know the answer to?
Yes.
All of you. So is skateboarding art?
Yeah. I tend to, as older I get, I tend to lean more into. You have to be an athlete. You have to keep your body in shape. You have to eat right. You have to keep on the practice on a daily regimen. You can take some time off, like spring training or like winter break, like an athlete takes. But I feel like not drinking and eating a healthy diet and staying constantly on the board at a progressive level, it's kind of like if your body falls apart at like 32 and you're an old man, I'm 32, I'm an old head, yo, I'm an old head. I'm like, yeah, you're also sitting in the bar and drinking pizza, eating pizza, drinking. Like, your body's not feeling good. You're not skating that much because you work 5 days a week and then you barely get out on the weekend warrior missions. So,
yeah. But then how?
I relate it to a sport. The older I get.
Okay, yeah. But is art, Sam?
I'm going to be controversial and say no.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
But I think one of the things I've been thinking about over the last couple of years is this idea of minor literature, which is this thing that these two French philosophers, Deleuze and Guattari, came up with to describe Franz Kafka. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's like a way of using the dominant language to still kind of survive, but kind of encode it, or like we would say now, like dog whistling within it, and find ways to kind of like create a little burrow for yourself, a protective burrow for yourself within like a larger system or a larger kind of like literature or language. In his case, it's like being forced to speak German, even though he's Jewish and there's like the Yiddish tradition.
Yeah.
And I think about it like with skateboarding, you could apply it and say, well, okay, I don't think skateboarding is necessarily like a minor art. I don't think that it really fits in that way because there's still lots of creativity and there's too much similarity, and I don't really think art has this kind of like imposing tyrannical force. Whereas if we think about like sports, we do start to think about that. You know, skaters are anathema to contest and competition. There's also this kind of mass appeal and this mainstreaming. And so if you start to think about skateboarding as a minor sport, suddenly these ideas around art or creativity or innovation or whatever start to have a little more tooth and start to kind of like be able to better situate skateboarding, like have a kind of parasitic survival relationship with this kind of more dominant narrative that's more kind of associated with power.
I like that. You? All right, yeah. Akwasí. That's a hard act to follow, but
Right.
How would you define art, and how do you sort of see skateboarding fitting into it in that way?
I think that skateboarding can be an art in ways, yeah, because I feel like, you know, back when it was created, I don't know, I feel like people coming up with new tricks and like just all the different things, like I feel like that is like creation, you know, it's like ideas, manifestation. I feel like it can be an art, and there's different styles involved and stuff. Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, it seems like one of the kind of fundamental orientations as a skateboarder. Again, the urban canvas thing I don't want to touch, but like, you know, just the way that we look at street furniture versus like how most people use it, and the sort of granular attention to what it's made of and whether that's an appealing. We have a very developed sense of aesthetics that has very little to do with like how most people use things, and it has to do with yes.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's like what's really interesting about the kind of minor sport idea is that this is like a process taking place in the mind, but there's still this sense of like passing in everyday life, like still kind of being forced because of like some power. I mean, whatever, skaters are fine, but like, but kind of being forced to kind of pass to get a normal job to whatever. and like there's still this kind of like undercurrent and kind of preserving this tradition or something.
Yeah. Jerry.
I think Sam's answer was very good.
I agree. Yeah.
I'm more on the no side, but skateboarding is obviously can be artistic, and it also obviously evokes an emotional response, and in that way, sure. But I think like I just want to say that like I think, you know, this debate is kind of interesting. It's very interesting to think about, obviously, but I think. In general, skateboarders might romanticize what they do a little bit too much. I feel like, I just feel like, you know, it's like just go skate. Like you don't really need to have this debate. It's fun to think about, of course. Like think about it all you want. But I think like maybe people kind of are a little bit too high on their own shit sometimes with this kind of thing. Like you don't need to. If you're just going out and skating, like you don't really need to pretend that you're making art or something like that. That's insane. So that's sort of my general opinion about it. Is just that like, of course it's artistic, of course it's creative, of course it pushes you to like do new things, experience new things, create new stuff, and it can inspire you in so many different ways, just like art. But whether it is an art is, I'm kind of more leaning towards probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I this is why I chose all of you, because I agree with everything you said. No, but I think that I think of art as a language that communicates outward, whether or not you, like if you're not an artist, you can. Most art was created for a population of an audience that didn't practice art and didn't know how the magical talismanic object was actually crafted. There weren't Instagram videos depicting the 3D printing lost blast technique, or you don't have loose skating as stuff like back then. And whereas skateboarding, as impressive as it may be to people who don't skate, do a fucking Google image search of New York Times kickflip and see how poorly like non-skateboarders manage to capture like the most basic understanding of what skateboarding is, or what looks good in skateboarding. You know, that skateboarding moves inward. We talk about it. It gets more intense the more kind of insular it is. And I'm not talking about gatekeeping. I just mean the language that we speak. Whereas like art kind of communicates outward, I believe. The more if you practice it and you're into it, the more you know, and the harder it is to talk about it, and the more incomprehensible it is, hence art speak. But yeah, that's my take.
I'd just like to add something. My wife was a dancer, and we saw the movie Black Swan in the theater, and we both came out of it both sort of thinking about what we do in an artistic way. And I remember, because in this movie there are two dancers. There's Natalie Portman and there's Mila Kunis, and then there's their teacher. And Natalie Portman is she is a perfectionist. She is the type of dancer who needs to be perfect, and she thinks that perfection is how she's going to achieve what she wants.
Wait, Desarmo.
Yeah, like a exactly. She writes for Primitive, basically. And
she had one trick in the video.
Yeah, and and sort of her nemesis in the movie, friend/nemesis, is Mila Kunis, who she doesn't care about perfection. It almost seems like she doesn't care about dancing at all. But she has a innate natural talent, and she just doesn't really care. But she's the one with all the style. You know what I mean? And Natalie Portman's just sort of like constantly getting like ignored, and she does not understand, and she eventually goes crazy. But I came out of that thinking like, wow, this is really like our world. This is really like how this is how skateboarders are celebrated. There's like the sort of perfectionist style or side, and then there are the people that you sort of look at and you're like, wow, I really love how little they care, and they look so good doing it. There's like the Wade Desarmos, but then there's like the Mark Gonzalez's or like the Rowan Zarillas or whatever.
Garrett Stir, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, and those aren't the only two types, but I'm just saying that like, but like that movie was really cool to me because it really illustrated something that I connected to, like the fact that wanting to be perfect can kill you, and maybe that's not a goal that you want to try to achieve.
So I have a recent photograph of yours on the screen. Where do you situate your art practice in the Natalie Portman, Mila Kunis spectrum that we've established?
Well, it's obviously perfect, so I would put it on the Natalie Portman side. No,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like, perfection is something that I've never tried to strive for. I've sort of always understood that, like, it's sort of a doomed dream.
Yeah.
Maybe not when I was younger. I think maybe perfectionism it's all that I understood as, like, because the culture I come from, perfectionism is sort of, it's sort of really hammered into you, like, it's like school for 8 hours, after school study for another 5 hours. It's, like, just if you just look at Chinese characters, just like the amount that, they have to practice it to make it absolute, to turn you into like a machine. It's sort of the culture that I come from. So a lot of what I do in my life is unconsciously and consciously sort of like trying to reject that. And when I was younger, it was very difficult to do that. It was very difficult to navigate that and like accept that that's what was happening. But so I think that's why I'm so lucky to be a skateboarder, and I'm so lucky to sort of embrace being an artist or photographer or whatever. Just because like growing up in that sort of culture sort of drove me crazy from a very early age. Like I hated it, and also like, I'm sorry I'm going into this like child of immigrants thing, but
no.
But like it is really and a lot of skateboarders can relate to this, where like you kind of grow up in two worlds. You have your like family, like, because like a lot of what skateboarding is an escape. So I feel like and for me personally, escaping my culture and my family was very important to me, because I think when you grow up the child of immigrants, especially if you're non-white in this country, there's you have a really hard time assimilating. There's sort of like this weird like violence of assimilation that happens where you kind of want to destroy your own culture. Like I remember the first time I went to school and I brought food that my mom had made, like Chinese food, and when I got made fun of for it, like it was so destructive to me that I was like, oh my God, like I can't bring anything from home. I have to
Get the Lunchable or whatever.
Yeah, I have to be exactly like everyone else to feel safe, and that was very destructive in my home life, because after that point, like I realized the way I could fit in was to just sort of kill like where I'd come from.
Wow.
So and skating was the same thing. Skating was extremely difficult for my family to understand.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very difficult, and it caused enormous amounts of problems for my family. And what's crazy about that is like becoming a pro skateboarder and achieving this type of autonomy. I'm sorry I'm going on this like insane route here, but like
We're here for this, right?
But yeah, I mean, it has to do with the art too, because like, it's part of the escape process. But like, what's crazy about that whole thing is this is an experience that, thousands and thousands of people have. But like, weirdly, like I gain this sort of unique autonomy becoming a pro skater, where like, I really just took off. I was like turned pro and was like, okay, that's it. Like, I'm gonna do exactly what I want from now on, and you have no control over me anymore. Which is interesting. I think it's like a very like bizarre situation for like like an Asian American kid to achieve. But I don't know. I don't really know where I was going.
Now
with
when I'm
that,
looking at your work, I'm like, I see, and on the one hand, on the left, this woman with like this like kind of like severe makeup job, like almost mask-like, in this kind of intense, like emotional thing? So what you said, now I'm just like reading your work that way. The apologetic bus.
Did art offer a similar kind of autonomy?
Yes, absolutely. I just feel like, and it also like, there's not at first, but I mean, at first, it was always just filled with so much anxiety. You know what I mean? Like, because I think like we try to really. Sometimes it's hard to just enjoy something that you like to do. You know what I mean? And skaters can kind of like relate to that, where like the constant anxiety of like, am I good or something? Like, you know, and you're constantly around people that are different levels of skating. So, but yeah, I mean, like I think like the making art and skateboarding do provide the same type of comfort, but also they provide the same type of anxiety and self-doubt, and you know, like it's so funny. They both destroy your mind in kind of like an equal way, but they also do the opposite. You know, like
yeah, they build up a different kind of mind.
Yeah, it really does kind of reshape how you experience life. And that sounds like such a cliche, but that is really true. I'm sure everyone in this room kind of understands that. But yeah, like art making, you know, and for me, these processes are very similar. You know, it's about hope, and it's about curiosity, but it's mostly about hope. It's funny because the photographs really invoke sort of, maybe people often say sadness or melancholy. But there's actually like there's a lot of hope involved in them, and also there's a lot of hope involved with the process. What I do is marred with failure, like on a daily basis. And like people often ask me, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you find all this stuff? And it's actually like a lot of fucking work. Like it's just like skateboarding, where, you know, you could go. I've been to, there's been stuff in my video parts where I had to go back 15 times. If you can imagine going to trying these like stuff like that 15 days,
yeah,
like for 4 or 5 hours a day, that's crazy when I look back on it. But all skaters can understand like micro failure. You know what I mean? They can understand like what it takes, and you know, in those ways it's similar, and in those ways it kind of makes you a little bit insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was I don't mean to call you out, Mo, but I taught Maurice Crandall, the tenured professor who's responsible for this, or you know, along with Ryan, like organizing this and funding it. I taught him frontside slappies yesterday, and he pulled it, and it was sick. And I was trying to explain at a certain point. I was like, you know, it's like you have to fight against every intuitive instinct you have as a skateboarder, like not lift your wheels, like not expect to stop when you hit the curb. You have to be completely illogical. But then there's this other way of feeling and looking that happens with slappies, and only slappies. And so I'm curious, like, Akwasí, sorry, I'm a huge fan of your slappies, so I sometimes want to like see where your head's at about it. But do you see a similarity in like the way that you skate and things that you make, in that sort of like, yeah.
In a way, yeah, I do. Like, I mean, for a while, like, I don't know, in skating, like so I learned how to do slappy crooks and like on taller things or whatever. And at the time, like, I don't know, when people would see me do that, it was probably like 5-6 years ago. I'm sure people were doing them, but it's just people weren't seeing it that often. And whenever I would go to like a skate park or something and I would do it on like a taller ledge, like people would kind of like flip out and be like, whoa, that was cool, you know? So like, I just kind of like was like, okay, let me like do more of that. Like, you know, things that like you're bringing, I guess something that people haven't seen. Yeah. So like, that was kind of my thing that got me into slappies. And I do take that same like thought with my art. Like I try to like, I don't know, like before I make something like this ring, I'll research, like, you know, make sure nobody's already like done that. Cause if they have, then I'm like, oh, whatever, like, you know, it's been done, you know? But yeah, so I do put that to my art. I try to make something that's a little different, I guess, so that, you know, it could hopefully have the same feeling to somebody you know?
Yeah. It's about like a similar sense of touch, right?
Yeah.
Or our mark making, our gesture, or the thing that identifies us. As you were saying, like I always try to do something different. I was like, wow, that's the complete opposite of me in skateboarding. I always try to do the same. Lou, you were talking a bit about earlier about development as a skateboarder, about progress, as about a sort of inheriting a lineage of skateboarding art makers, and also moving forward. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I just like strive to be the best artist I can be in skateboarder and try to progress at a level that I feel obtainable to myself.
Which means not getting stagnant, right?
Yeah, which means not getting stagnant, kind of like evolving with the times. And I just look back at like what Mark Gonzalez and Ed and Brian Lottie have done on and off the board, whether it's like Gon's board sliding that large rail or 50-50ing the first handrail, and Ed's impact on street skateboarding and art and photography and skateboarding is just like unbelievable. And Brian Lottie's paintings they paved the road for us, like. But I feel like there's kind of been some stagnant times in the last like 25, 30 years with like skateboarders who are artists, and like they sometimes like they don't really progress like with the way that skating has progressed. Like they 50-50'd the handrail, and then like Costin generation did this, and then like our generation should be like what I feel like with what Akwasí's work is like that's a perfect representation of what this generation should be doing on and off the board, is like getting the 3D printer for Jeep, figuring out, getting the foundry, getting the crucible, melting, learning lost wax, like casting. Like, dude, I found out about that stuff like not that long ago, and that's super ancient technique, and then to be mixing it with this technology is just like beautiful to me. So his work is like how I feel like stop doodling and get busy. Let's go, like, come on, like, you know, like we had Mark, Ed, and Brian to pave this road and do these maneuvers and and make these paintings and this photography, but like, let's step it up. Right. Like as artists and skateboarders, like let's just step it up. Like that's just how I feel. Like I'm kind of sick of a pro career dwindling, and then they're doodlers. Yeah. And everyone's amazing. I'm like, ego stroking over doodling. I'm cool with, but I just think you can doodle like every medium that I delve into. You kind of have to start at like a crayon watercolor level. Like if I'm gonna delve into painting, I gotta like throw paint on a canvas like Jackson Pollock before I even touch a brush, just to understand the material. Like start abstract and simple and then work your way in, just like skateboarding. We started with like tic-tacking ollies and slappy nose slides, and kind of like do that. If you delve into a new medium, like start slow with stone carving. I drilled a hole in a rock. Yeah, that's it. That's how I got into stone carving. But at Acropolis and crazy stuff that happened in Athens, I was like, I really want to do it. And then COVID happened. March 24th, 2020, I went to Home Depot and waited in line, and I had this idea through my arbor sculpture pieces that were inspired by Goldsworthy, where I used to take skateboard objects back to my mom's house and grow them into trees to represent what I saw in New York. And coming from a small like country town on Cape Cod, I wanted to convey that same feeling that I was so amazed by when I saw trees growing around things. Taking that back home in 2005, after a few years of living in New York City, I wanted to drill a hole in a rock and grow it around a tree. Yeah. And then I got to Home Depot and I saw the hole saw said 51 millimeters.
This is the idea sprouting from your head. Athena-like.
My bald head, the light bulb. Bing! And I said, lockdown. The skate parks are getting filled. They're not letting us skate. I'm gonna pound this wheel with a dead blow hammer into this stone, and that to me is a beautiful, simplistic stone sculpture. Lovely. Mixed with a little bit of influence from Andy Goldsworthy, Noguchi, and the world of skateboarding. I just want to mix those three of like inspirations, is like Noguchi, Goldsworthy, and skateboarding at that moment.
Thank you. All right, excellent. I'm gonna. We have a special treat now, which is, I think Sam is going to, I'm going to be his TA, and he's going to present for the last few minutes we have before questions. I'm not going to talk about Winslow Homer, John Singer Sargent.
Yeah, so like Ted said, I used to be an art critic, and then the pandemic happened, and I had to really reconsider what I was doing. Partly because I was so broke, and I got fired from my editor job at an art magazine, and also because I'd been unhappy for a really long time, and it was sort of a gift to have a little bit of extra space to finally be like, maybe I can write about skateboarding, and like unite these two halves of myself that have kind of, for whatever false reasons, like have remained separate. But you know, you go to art school, and you're like, maybe I just want to focus on that for a while, and that while was 15 years. So one of the things that kind of feels very important to me now is like to try to look at skateboarding and provide a language and context for it outside of itself, and hopefully like provide some tools for things that happen in skating that aren't just skating. And I think the art world is like a great place to do that. I just wanted to start with this slide with this book, Roland Barthes Mythologies. Anyone who's gone to a liberal arts college may have encountered it. It's a collection of essays from the 1960s. Barthes was a French theorist, and he wrote very beautifully. But this kind of cultural commentary applied a lot of philosophy to like really everyday stuff. So he writes about like wrestling or why children should play with wooden toys. I think something that feels relevant here. I got that book from a friend at a skate shop because I was like hanging out, and he was like, "Oh, this guy likes to read. Maybe he should like read this." And so, very lucky to have my friend Jacob Cassay, who like gave me this. I don't know, Marby, your story the other night really reminded me of like, you know, these friends that kind of keep coming and disappear and reappear in our lives and dreams. So this is a very obvious one. You know, you like go into the art world and you're like, oh yeah, I love skateboarding, but I'm not allowed to talk about it here. And then suddenly you're like in this kind of 1980s unit in art history, and they're like, hey, this is Dan Graham. He's interested in corporate architecture and like subcultures. And obviously the skateboard pavilion is like, you know, a decent place to start. I met with Dan, and he recently passed away, but he was like, oh, you know, I proposed this because I wanted to make sure that I could reinsert skateboarders into the city center. It was proposed for a garden festival in Stuttgart. And he was like, damn, this place is way too clean. I want to find a bunch of troublemakers to put back in the city. So he proposed this, which was summarily refused, but he also kind of described this two-way mirror glass pavilion on top as like wanting to give skateboarders a psychedelic experience when they're in the air, which I thought was like a really beautiful kind of reciprocal exchange. Like, okay, you come skate my bowl and I'll get you like a head trip when you're flying out.
You will bail every air and hit your head on the
I
song
tried to
pay-per-view.
explain to him like why that wouldn't work, and he just like laughed at me and talked about something else. Okay, so now it's like kind of more of a one-for-one. So I think a lot of this talk has been about, you know, like how skateboarding applies to kind of materials and methods in art making, and I'm trying to like also show ways that it kind of can, we can draw from concepts in the art world to expose all the kind of peripheral work and labor that goes into skateboarding and building a scene and all the other things that we're talking about during this conference. So this is Merle Latterman Ukele's. In the late 60s, she came up with this notion of maintenance art. She was a mom, she's an artist, and she's just trying to kind of keep things together. And so she's like, well, I don't have time to like make objects or do paintings, but I do have all this time where I'm like cleaning and looking after other people and doing all this care work. So what if that's just what I did in the museum? And, you know, so part of this, I'll read a portion of it. So I am an artist, I am a woman, I am a wife, I am a mother, random order. I do a hell of a lot of washing, cleaning, cooking, renewing, supporting, preserving, etc. Also, up to now, separately, I do art. And now I will simply do these maintenance, everyday things and flush them up to consciousness, exhibit them as art. So, you know, she would come in and kind of like mop the floors, or during the late 1970s, when there were lots of like trash strikes and all of these labor strikes, and New York was kind of going down the tubes, she went and shook the hand of every sanitation worker, and just, you know, using, I think now we would say like using her platform to draw attention to like these other laborers, but back then it was like unheard of that this privileged category of art might kind of like dip or acknowledge any other circumstance that surrounds it. And so she actually did this, and then the sanitation department in New York was so touched that they gave her a desk at the office, and she was the artist in residence at the New York Department of Sanitation. For many years, it's actually a position that still exists, and there's like a residency program now. So I wanted to kind of compare that to like the Slow Impact Spot book, or anyone who's kind of like rub bricked a ledge and kind of opened up a spot and kind of taken the time away from skateboarding in order to kind of like do a little spot maintenance, or all of these kinds of like care acts that people do and put into, but we don't always have the right context to share them. This is Ashley Bickerton, incredible artist from the 1980s, was like really kind of interested in branding and consumption. I think something in skateboarding we all are confronted with is like there are no, apart from skate after school, there are like no nonprofits, there are no other arenas that like exist for expression outside of like the branded environment. Ashley Bickerton was looking at this in the 1980s, and all of these kind of objects were, they were meant to look useful. They evoked crates, or they evoked all these materials that seemed like you could kind of like seem quasi-useful, but their use was really unclear. And then on them, he painted his own personal brand, Bickerton and Susie, but also all the other brands that he had consumed over a given period of time, usually a month. I think this is probably the clearest example, but it's like these empty vessels that we try to fill with meaning and consumption as selfhood, and kind of questioning what those mean, obviously with a kind of sense of humor here. So this is A.K. Burns and A.L. Steiner Community Action Center. Basically, A.K. and A.L. Got all of their friends and ex-lovers and collaborators together and decided to make their own softcore porn. It was like a really messy, crazy disaster, and like ended a lot of friendships, but also kind of forged a lot of friendships. It kind of came out of this kind of film tradition, starting in like the 1960s with Jack Smith's Flaming Creatures, but also in the 1970s with a lot of lesbian filmmakers, including Barbara Hammer. So there's this tradition of like appropriating a lot of these tropes from porn, and from various kind of like pulpy romance novels and whatnot, and kind of reinterpreting them as ways to kind of like free or renegotiate a lot of LGBTQI bodies, a lot of marginalized bodies. And I think of it every time I watch their skateboards ruining skateboarding. And one of the really beautiful things that like I think about probably every day in that video is like how struck I was when Chandler includes their partner and their lover in the part. And I'm like, oh, there's always friends in skate videos, like there's often like the skater skated with a lot, or they wanted to like shout out a homie or whatever. But this was like, oh, this starts from such a deeper place of like love and intimacy to do that, and like completely rewires what a skate video could be in terms of like showing off what a community is, and like, I don't know, like skateboarding as a means of love and not just like, I don't know, something else, whatever.
Round of applause for that. I don't want to hurry you along. I just want to check time. How are we doing? Are we? Okay, cool. Thanks. All right, awesome. We'll continue. Let's talk about.
I just wanted to add that Mike, Chandler's partner, who's in that video, he didn't even skate when they met. So like he really kind of fell in love with skateboarding because of Chandler, and now he like loves skateboarding.
How did you do that? Because I'm trying to convince my wife.
What was the question? I was not ready for a panel, and I don't have a voice. Hi, everybody. My name's Chandler. I'm an alcoholic.
I mean, I was part joking. I was just like, how did that come about? Because I mean, I've like jokingly, but not jokingly, been like to my wife, like, you would love skating, and you should maybe finally try. Like, she's constantly been like, God, that looks so fun. I want to do that. And I'm like, come to the skate park, and she's like, I will kill you if you ever bring that up.
Yeah. Well, shout out CCS for getting Mike a box. Also, shout out Deluxe and all my like skate friends for being so like helpful and like kind to him. And How did it go about? When we first started talking on a gay dating app called Scruff, he kind of was like, he was super respectful. Like, usually it's just like kind of like horny on those apps. And it was very respectful. And he was kind of like, oh, I work for Sony and I do art direction. And I think you're really cool. And I would like to expand my like art kind of whole circle. And we started hanging out. And then he started talking about how he like randomly became interested in skateboarding through Unity. And then like, he didn't really know about me or of me, but like he knew of that. And, yeah, that's kind of like what sparked it in him, and he's just like been along for the journey. He started filming me, and it's like he has a degree in like cinema stuff. I don't know, like videography or whatever the fuck you want to call it, but in video stuff and photography. So
I mean, how beautiful is it that you get to like kind of look at each other with these different things and like look. I mean, I don't know.
It's so beautiful, but it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I love him to death, but Jesus Christ, it's not as amazing as it seems, but it is beautiful, and I don't know, y'all bringing it up really hit home a lot. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I also didn't expect to cry as much as I have at this thing. Okay, I only have a couple more, and I'll be quick. This one, this was sort of like the fundamental thing when I was in art school, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, there's somebody else who goes to New Jersey and like looks for crusty spots. Like, and yeah, so Robert Smithson was this artist. He came up with this concept of the non-site. So he was like looking at the kind of suburbs of New Jersey in the 1960s, and he was like, oh, this place seems more organized based on form than time. Basically, like, here's this like just functional landscape that's like kind of deracinated and historicized, like just kind of plucked out of history, and has become this sort of like crystallizing, crusty place. And so semi-ironically, he like sets it up like a tour, and writes this article for Artforum, and basically, talks about, whether New Jersey is the new Rome. It's like thinking about it as like, oh, okay, how can we think about this landscape as like an instant ruin, and what does that idea mean? And I think there's so many people who've like kind of picked up this lineage, but obviously I just want to like shout out Fred Gall, and thinking about Jody's spot and this kind of like reflexive back and forth kind of space under a bridge. And a lot of Smithson's work also kind of focuses on this sort of reflexive relationship to sight, and the way in which like you can never really feel where you are. Also always like kind of resonated with me in skateboarding. Okay, that one's. And then so his wife was named Nancy Holt, also an incredible artist. And she was also really interested in kind of embedding spots with like a sense of deep time, and looking at all these different ways that you can understand a given site through like massive tectonic celestial histories. And obviously it's like a little new agey, until you realize that she's also, in this kind of very minor sport type of way, inserting her into this kind of civic infrastructure of certain towns, and working in a really deliberately public and deliberately bureaucratic system, and being able to kind of interject these borderline spiritual ideas into the state. And somehow convincing them to like let her use these kind of disused places. So this is in Roslyn, Virginia. It was like recently refurbished and bought by the Dia Art Foundation. And it is a park. Maybe the next slide will also convey that. So it converted a traffic island into this incredible park, and all of these sort of apertures and spheres and walking paths, they're all meant to kind of align with certain constellations at different times. So like some of them, it's like, okay, here's where the stars were on the day the park was founded. But also, here's a constellation that only appears every 60,000 years. And kind of having these overlapping histories on this kind of like otherwise overused or overlooked site. And so I felt like Leo Val's kind of similarly working within a civic infrastructure to kind of embed skateboarding is like a literal understanding, but also there's just, this same sense of like, skaters see things differently. So when you're like looking at this average thing, and 800 people who've skated this curb and whatever, and all of that's like kind of these alternate timelines. and kind of another public space. So this is Arakawa and Gin's, the site of reversible destiny, using architecture as a means to kind of dehabituate ourselves to space. So like normally architecture kind of conditions certain habits, certain social structures. You go to the kitchen because that's where your food is. You go to your bedroom to sleep. And they through the use of like repetition, color, undulating surfaces, and this kind of like Nickelodeon surrealism, create this like truly trippy place to be. And I was just there recently. It's in Gifu, Japan. And it was like the first time that I've ever been a place and felt like I was skateboarding without actually skateboarding, if that makes sense. Like there's this kind of basin structure, and I really felt like I was at a skate park, kind of like there was just this immediate sense of playfulness and frustration and danger. Like there are like actual pits you can fall into. And so looking this image up was like my breaking point yesterday, where I'm like, am I really going to show an image of Bob Burnquist doing the gap loop switch? Like, but there's kind of this same sense of like insane, surreal possibility, and just sort of like subverting something and like rewiring the grammar, not just the visual vocabulary or aesthetic vocabulary, but like the structural way it actually exists in the world. And you know, I think Bob Burnquist might like live on a dead end street, and it's a very robust dead end street. He's made a nice home for himself there. And like I don't know who else is like going to go live down there, but anyway, this was like the thing that came to mind for whatever reason. But again, this feels like it can always apply more broadly to skateboarding and the way we see things differently. And finally, I just want to finish on my wife's work, not only because I love her and think that what she makes is amazing, but I think that she's a brilliant thinker. And I think that one of the things that's been discussed throughout this entire weekend is this kind of notion of equity, and how do we build equity into what we're doing? How do we share equity? How can brands share equity and not just extract? I think that when many of us are like invoking these big shoe brands, part of it is that they're just siphoning stuff out. It's like a casino, and you go to gamble. It's like they pluck the money out. Whereas if you're gambling with your friends, there's no house. The money just moves amongst a community. So how do we keep that money in the community? And unfortunately, we're all kind of given the same shitty tools, which is Instagram and Twitter. And so, like, how do we actually functionally navigate those things? Dina is the person who coined the term normcore. She is the one who understands how you like use language to kind of create a rubric. Yeah, creating situations where it's like these are the false dichotomies all of us as precarious workers are faced with as our lives kind of go more and more online, being seen or being known, time versus value, kind of having to make all these false equivalencies. So maybe I'll just kind of conclude on this this incredible essay that she wrote called The Content Industrial Complex. And it is about how brands, use artists as influencers and the way that they kind of extract value from these communities in a way that's very similar, I think, to, what was discussed yesterday about like Pride Month being the one time everybody gets paid. And like, how do we spread that out throughout the year? So I'll just kind of finish on this quote. So, never entirely innocent, the role of the artist in these negotiations has shifted radically toward complicity. Producing content in the form of artworks and social media posts, the cultural influencer functions as a highly valued asset for brands. As brands increasingly turn towards the cultural sphere and seek out the validation and collaboration of artists, it is critical to gain an understanding of the way that our artwork and action on social media is being perceived on the other side of the feed, so all of these brands. We must recognize how our work, be it the photos we post, the artwork we create that includes the names and images of brands in the work itself, and the network of people, places, and things that are revealed through our social activity, is quantified and instrumentalized. It is only then that we can create alternative models that pay for our labor, content, and engagement, or identify strategies and tactics of resistance. Obviously, it's well and good to say something like that, but Dina's created a branding agency which also represents artists. So she creates these partnerships. They pool all the money, and it creates this massive grant at the end of the year. It's a cooperative structure. And that money goes back to these artists. It becomes grants so that they can make their artwork. It becomes money so that they don't have to work. And it's this kind of shared value that this community actually is able to like bring for itself. Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of her for doing this and like, putting her money where her mouth is.
But it's also a really great potential model that hasn't been tried in skateboarding. And
Exactly. Yeah. And so, all of these ideas of precarity, I think we all just kind of have to admit that like we're all juggling a million jobs to be able to do the thing that we love, be an artist or a skateboarder or an academic or whatever. There's like the grind set is real and it's 24 hours a day and there's no turning it off. Anyway, yeah, and all of that's been worked out in the art world a lot over the last several years, and I think there's lots of kind of great tools to be found there. Yeah, anyway, thanks. That's it.
That's it. Do we have time for questions? I'd love to open it up for questions. I saw your hand go up first. Please.
Yeah, this is for Jerry. First off, the Black Hat Maple video was one of the like 2 or 3 videos I had on VHS. I watched it maybe like 1,000 times, so very influential. I loved your story about growing up skating and you're talking about like problems with your family, which I bet a shit ton of people here have like experienced themselves.
A fuck ton, in fact.
And I was wondering, like all these years later, like the video games, like huge pro career, like tons of boards, like. Are they down with skating yet?
Can I just have to repeat your question for the recording. Yeah, given all the sort of like, has your family turned a corner with your skating, given your background and the story you told?
Sure. Thank you, by the way. I'd just like to say that like, on the spectrum of parents who don't understand what their kids do and seemingly don't support what they do. My parents are actually now that I'm an adult, I realize that they actually did care a lot about what I wanted. And they did support me quite a bit. It was just, when you're a teenager or a kid, it's very, very difficult to see the perspective from your parents. And as an adult, it's funny, like I pointed out earlier, like they come from a place with different values. So, in America, I think like we really value individualism. Individualism is something that has been pushed on me and probably all of us, like the idea or whatever. It's really like hammered into us, and I really, swallowed that pill. I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna, because my parents come from a place where it's about don't rock the boat and you need to help everybody, They come from Taiwan, and Taiwan is a democratic country, but a lot of their values come from China, and China is, typically not viewed that way. And so my need to serve my own desires was so foreign and sort of insulting to them. But like I said, that they're definitely more on the side of understanding, and honestly, they didn't really stop trying to tell me what to do until I bought a house, and I was 25, and I did it by myself, which I don't think anyone in my family had ever done before, and that made me kind of sad, because I was like, wow, I've done so much. But that's what did it. Right. It was because, it's weird. I think everyone in this, we all need money and we all value like success, but like it was really kind of, it was kind of weird to me that like it was like I had to own this material thing before I had before I had the respect I required for them to leave me alone. Do you know what I mean? Like
it's not the storm flip; it's the money that the storm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. Like I would bring home Thrashers. Like I had the cover of Thrasher, or like this is my pro board, or like I'm in Australia, I'm in this place. You know what I mean? It got to the point where I didn't share my
successes with them anymore, because it was just so, I just felt so rejected in that, like, kind of like that way that only like your parents can sort of dismiss you because they just kind of don't speak your language, you know. They're your emotional language, like the language that like the type of like love that you need. You know what I mean?
So DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Just don't understand.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean now now it's great, but there is just like this kind of like, oh yeah, that's cool type reaction I get from anything that I do, even with like my business or even with like sci-fi, which is like such a weird thing. Like I didn't really think I would go down this path, but it does make it a little bit easier for my father to relate to me because it's like I run a business now. So now that he can like ask me questions, and while before they had no fucking idea what I did. They just thought I was like a circus performer, you know what I mean? They just thought I like traveled around and like we did tricks for people, which is kind of what we did. But like all right. But yeah, nice. So yeah.
Okay. I hope that answered the question.
I just want to chime in real quick, right here, Lyrical Loop. My mom always says this. I don't try to understand what you do, and I hear that like all the time. So it's just like kind of like, it's cool. My kid's into this. He does his thing. I don't ever like. I don't get it. I don't want to get it. It's just like, do you have fun? So I guess I feel kind of like a little, maybe privileged that my mom and parents just kind of like, go get out of here type thing. Yeah. So
thank you for chiming in. I appreciate that, because that allows the opportunity to open that up to everyone. So Akwasí, like, how do your parents feel? How do like about what you do?
My dad never really liked the skating, or neither did my mom, but for different reasons. Like my dad was more like, what's that gonna do for you? Like, what's that skateboard gonna do for you? Pretty much money-wise, like, like you're not gonna, And then my mom, she was more like, she didn't want me to get hurt, like, or something like that. So, as a young kid, I used to like that used to bother me a lot. Like, I'm like, why can't you guys understand that, like, I can do a 360 flip and, this and that or whatever, like, and it was just meant nothing to them. But as I got older, like he was saying, I actually like that, because like, I kind of do my own thing, and like, they're not like all up in my business, like kind of some skate parents nowadays, like, I see that and I'm like, that's like the polar opposite of what I had. And like, I could see that, like, oh, maybe I don't want that, so that's how I feel.
Yeah. Sam.
Well, being an art critic is the job every parent dreams their kid's gonna get. So they were nothing but happy. No, it was completely illegible, and it's still an uphill struggle to get them to understand. Or the things that makes my life legible to them are always extremely surprising. Like, similarly, like, I'm traveling, like, I'm getting paid to go to Brazil to be able to do this thing. They're like, yeah, great, whatever. And then one time, I was like part of a press trip that was sponsored by the German like consulate of tourism or something, and for whatever reason that official stamp like blew their mind, and they were like posting about it on Facebook, and my sister was like, I'm very proud of my brother for being attached to the German consulate of tourism. And I was like, that's the mark? Like, that was the thing that needed the official stamp? But no, I mean, at a certain point too, it's just like, I'm just happy they loved me and gave me the space, like Lurker Lou said. Like, they didn't know how to understand, but they knew how to say, like, okay.
That's great, yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, you. Hi.
So, like, you brought up extraction. I've been really obsessed with AI lately, and how you can go on to ChatGPT and you can say, write me a Jenkins-style article and start farting out shit. And but on the same level, you can now go to a photo one and be like, give me a Russian child photo in the style of Jerry Hsu. And like, it's almost like LimeWire or something for music, and now it's going to be the AI version. Like, should we rebel completely against it and be like, no, this is wrong, please how are you thinking about that? Like, is it like lurker, like you could go on there and be like, oh, give me a fishbowl, a skateboard.
Yeah, no, I know. It's like that. There's like the
Very quickly,
dolly
just-
thing.
This is a question about the influence of AI for the recording.
Yeah.
Go forth, sorry.
We were kind of delving in a little bit about 3D printing and CNC and like what I hold dearly to my heart with like being very hands-on as an artist. I try to like steer super clear of like, I'm not at all inclined with like too much computers or technology. So I really like I want to be as hands-on as I can. And with the medium of stone carving is pretty much dying because of 5-axis arm machines and CNC, and it's hard work, and a lot of people are dying and not passing on any of the knowledge. And I feel like AI is like making, of course, this is like very cliche, it's making us all stupid. I don't know where skate spots are in New York that I've known where they are for 20 years, and I forget where they are because I depend on my phone so much. So I think that's really scary, those weird essays that people are posting. And I also find that Dolly, like photo generator app, like very unentertaining. And I'm not impressed. I'm impressed maybe with the guy that developed the app. I'm impressed with that, but I feel like that's like some Terminator 2 for art.
I think you should be really careful what you say about our overlords, but I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer. I'm about to be put out of a job, you know. Like, but I do think that like I don't know how in skateboarding like people are going to respond. Maybe Sheckler will finally backside flip Del Toro, but like we could generate that image. But I think as far as creativity goes or like art stuff goes, it's like, well, yeah, we can have this like idea of originality. I mean, basically, like Joseph Beuys had this comment like, no new technology like doesn't have blood on its hands. You know, like there's it just gets naturalized. And so, you know, it can be the job of the artist to like get in there and do this messy work and kind of tread ambiguous ethical territory to work it out and be able to report on those mistakes, you know. And obviously, I think like we all have this very apocalyptic imagination right now about like this, you know, being the end. And but you know, I don't know if it'll quite be. I mean, whatever. I don't want to make any predictions, but I think that there is a way like artists can kind of get in there and use it, and like that's okay. I think we'll decry it now, but in 10 years we'll be like, they were onto something.
Oh, Tebow.
Hi. So a little two-pronged question, but how does your identity mesh with the medium that you use? And if you had to incorporate a new medium in your art practice, what would it be?
Excellent. Great question. So, thank you for also a really well-phrased question that I can repeat. How does your identity mesh with the medium that you use? And if you could incorporate a new medium into your practice, what would it be? Crusty stone man.
Like the way that I perceive my art in the last like couple years is manicuring stones myself, carving them, and then skating the ones that are unmanicured and raw. Like once I learned how to like tap in and work with stone, I realized that we've been skating rocks forever. Wherever we go in every city and every urban environment, we're skating rock. It's just granite cut and polished and put out in the street. So I wanted to like flip it back. Once I started to understand stone and carving, I took that and I wanted to find the rawest first spot. I was always on the hunt for the first spot. And I realized the first spot is a 500 million year old rock on City Island in the Bronx. And there's a million first spots. And I just like, I feel like I have like a hard outer shell and I'm kind of a soft inside guy. Like you guys had me weeping the other night. And I feel like stone is like that too. People present it as this hard thing, but its fragility is matched like twice as hard when you get a little thin on it, and things fall apart over time. It doesn't matter. Like really, nothing is forever. Even stone.
What, are you gonna
and
start,
skateboarding
are you
isn't
gonna
forever.
start sculpting in butter next?
No, but if I'm doing ephemeral, it's sand, small rocks.
Nice. Akwasí, what's next on the medium?
Next, I'd like to probably get better at 3D like animation and stuff. I think it's cool. I would say like the mediums that I've worked in kind of relate to my personality by, I don't know, because I'm kind of like scatterbrained. I kind of like, I'm into this, then I jump into that and jump into this. And I feel like that aspect of it is like kind of how my mind is all the time, personality-wise. So. But yeah, if I could do something new, I would get better at 3D animation right now.
Cool. Jerry, you gonna Russ Pope doodle soon?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, I think like as far as like another medium goes, like, you know, usually this pipeline leads to like film. But honestly, like I sort of daydream about that, but I'm pretty loyal to, you know, photography and like what I do now. And as far as like my identity goes, like, I mean, I don't really know. Like one thing I would say is that like skating, photography has helped me be in the world. And what I mean by that is it helps me to leave my house. I have like I suffer from sort of clinical depression, and so like there is a lot of time that I quote unquote lose. You know, it's just people think I do a lot, but like most of my time is spent frozen, and I don't really get a lot accomplished. And I think that's why like when I'm not in that state, I have to seize that stuff. I have to seize that window as much as possible, because the next sort of prison sentence is kind of right around the corner. I always know it's coming. So what photography can do for me in my, you know, daily life is it will push me to go somewhere, or to have hope that something could happen that I can use for my artwork. So I would just kind of put it that way.
Thank you for seizing that window with us, and thank you all for your excellent attention over the last 90 minutes. Thank you. Round of applause.